Good morning. So today we are going to shift gears a little bit and use some of the skills that we've been talking about with negative numbers and talk a little bit about integers and absolute value. So our learning target for today is I can find the absolute value of a number. Okay, so lately we have been talking a lot about positive positive and negative numbers. Okay. So a few examples of positive numbers would be 5, 10, 27, anything that is greater than 0, right? So if I were to write an inequality, x would need to be anything greater than 0. Okay, and if I have, if I'm listing some negative numbers, I might have -1, -16, and -11. Okay, those are just a few examples, and that would mean that any number less than 0 would fit into the negative category, right? So there's all sorts of numbers in between, right? There's decimals, 5.5, -1 3/4, -7.2, or 15 and 75/100. All sorts of different examples. However, today we're really going to focus on integers. And integers are positive and negative whole numbers. Whole numbers, okay? No decimals, no fractions. So when we think about positive and negative whole numbers, there's also opposites, okay? So opposites are two numbers, one positive and one negative, that have the same distance away from 0. Okay, so for instance, if we were to draw a number line, and I have 0 here, and I'm plotting points like +5, and I were to find its opposite is, the same number with a negative symbol. However, I can see that this is 5 units away, just like this number is 5 units away from 0. Same distance, okay? They're called equidistance. I'm going to draw a little arrow over here. Equidistant. Okay? So when we talk about opposites, it does mean that they're the same distance away from 0, which means that they have the same absolute value. The absolute value of a number is the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. So one important thing to remember about absolute value is that it's always going to be positive because it's distance, right? Even if you're walking backwards, you're still taking steps. That, you can't retract or undo your steps. You're just changing the direction in which they go. All right, so as we get started practicing absolute value, you're going to start to see a new symbol. You may have seen it in the past, but when we write the absolute value of a number, you see it between these two straight line. So I'm going to use a to represent our number because we're using a as a variable. It could be any value. Now, if we were finding the absolute value of -2, you would see it written with these two lines side by side, and the absolute value of -2 equals 2, because if you were to plot the point -2 on a number line, you would see that it's 2 units away from 0. Okay, so this distance is 2 units, which is its absolute value. Okay? Now, the same thing actually goes for positive numbers. Okay, so the absolute value of +2 is actually still 2. So numbers and their opposites have the same absolute value because they're the same distance away from 0, which is how you would define the opposite of a number. Okay? So we've been talking a lot about integers, which are positive and negative whole numbers. So these two numbers here are integers. But you can find the absolute value of any number. You can find the absolute value of -1/4, which looks like that. And the distance -1/4 is away from 0. If you were to plot it on a number line, and I'm going to plot -1, 0. I know that -1/2 is between those two numbers, and I know that -1/4 is between 0 and -1/2. So I would actually plot that there, and I know that the distance from -1/2 to 0 is actually, the distance from -1/4 to 0 is 1/4. Absolute value is always positive. Okay? Same thing goes for numbers with decimals. So these two lines mean that I'm asking the absolute value of -12 and 9/10, which is 12 and 9/10. Okay? Just like if I asked you the absolute value of 7.5, that's 7.5. Okay? Absolute value is the distance away from 0 that number is on a number line. Okay, so a lot of times you might see these type of problems, living here in Colorado, with elevation, okay? Above sea level, below sea level, okay? And if we were to use an integer to represent sea level, the integer that we would use is 0, right? We're not above sea level in a positive direction, but we're not negative feet below sea level. Same thing with like a thermometer, right? On a thermometer, you have degrees that are above 0, and then you have negative degrees, which are below 0. Okay, so those are a few real-world examples that you might see often. So temperature. We talk about sometimes money when you're in debt. Okay, when you're cashing a check or depositing a check, those are all integers and positive and negative numbers, even if they're not whole numbers, not integers, right? Because money could be represented as like $12.50. That would not be an integer because it's not a whole number. Okay. So let's do a few more practice items comparing integers and ordering them from least to greatest. So I'm going to give you a few examples here. And first we're going to compare -2 and the absolute value of -2. Okay, so I leave a blank here because I'm going to use greater than, less than, or equal to. Okay, now just like we do with any other math, we want to show our work. So right below it, I'm just going to write the absolute value, or just rewrite the first digit, and then I'm going to write the absolute value of -2, which I know is +2 because it's always positive. if I were to plot these two numbers on a number line, here's 0, and I know that -2 is over here, and I know that +2 is somewhere over here. And the one that's further to the right on the number line is larger. Okay, so even though in our original problem we see -2, remember that it was asking for its absolute value. Okay. Another example would be to compare 8 and the absolute value of -8. Okay. So this is just a space for me to put greater than, less than, or equal to. And it's always important to take it step by step. And I know that nothing's happening with this digit, with this integer, so I'm just going to leave it there. And the absolute value of -8 is 8. So when I compare those, I know that 8 and 8 are equal because they're the same spot on a number line. Okay. Now, let's practice ordering integers. I'm sorry, ordering values based on absolute values, which could include integers. So I'm going to order a certain set of numbers in order from least to greatest. And I'm going to start with the absolute value of -3, the absolute value of 5, the integer -3, -4, and then the absolute value of -4. Okay. As always, I'm going to organize my thoughts and make sure I solve these problems here, which there are problems here that need solving because these symbols tell me that I'm trying to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of -3 is +3. It's always going to be positive. The absolute value of 5 is 5. It's the distance away from 0. I'm not solving anything with these two digits, so I'm just going to rewrite them, and the absolute value of -4 is 4. So I have my list of numbers I'm rewriting, and then I'm solving, and then I'm going to reorder. Okay, so I'm first going to solve, and then I will reorder. Doing too many steps in the same step can get confusing. So when I'm reordering numbers, it helps to draw a number line. And a lot of my number lines, I see that my smallest number is going to be a negative number. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I have room over there. I always like to plot 0 if I can, if it's not too far away. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my greatest number. And I'm going to plot, I'm going to make some tallies for -1, -2, -3, and -4. Just to remind you, when we're drawing a number line, these tick marks are just showing us where different numbers are on a number line. It's not until when we plot the point, so when we put a dot or a closed circle, that we're actually plotting a number. So we're going to plot 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to just label it above it so I know. And then I'm going to plot 5, and then I'm going to plot -3, 1, 2, 3, -3, -4, and then 4, which is over here. And the nice thing about using a number line is if you look really closely at my work here, I already have the answer written in order. So all I have to do is copy it down from left to right if I'm going from least to greatest. -4, -3, 3, 4, 5. And that's my final answer. Okay, so let's keep practicing. Let's keep comparing. Let's keep using strategies that we know. We know how to plot numbers on a number line. We've started to get some practice with integers, which are positive and negative whole numbers. And now we're incorporating a few skills like absolute value, finding the distance away from 0, and comparing those to other numbers. So if you have any questions, let us know, and we look forward to practicing and getting good at this stuff.